So, what if everything you've been taught about success is backwards? The highest performers do not spend their lives solving problems, they create the right problems. Today, you're about to hear why that one shift could completely change your career, your relationships, and your future. So, most of us spend our lives trying to avoid discomfort, uncertainty, and failure. But what if that's exactly what's preventing us from reaching our potential? Today's guest, returning once again, is Ted Santos, and he believes the greatest leaders in history intentionally create challenges that force breakthrough thinking. He is the founder of Turnaround Investment Partners, the creator of the Disruptive Leadership Model, and has spent years helping executives transform struggling companies into industry leaders by changing how they think, not just what they do. So his philosophy is simple but radical. Breakthroughs don't happen by avoiding problems, they happen by creating better ones. So Ted is one of those rare guests who can take a simple idea and completely change the way you see the world. So let's get into it. Ted, it's so good to have you back. I was thinking that you were an international speaker going around doing TED Talks because every time you come on, you have so much interesting stories to tell and such a great perspective on leadership.
Well, I am Ted, so it would make sense to do a TED Talk. So thanks for having me here. My pleasure. And it sounds like, just for the audience to know, these are not rehearsed conversations between you and I. So I'm looking forward to this one, and where you and I will have an opportunity to really dive into this one and provide a lot of value. So thanks for choosing this topic.
Yeah, I'm excited. So, something that almost sounds insane when people first hear it is that great leaders don't solve problems, they create them. Can you explain that a little bit so people understand?
Sure. Lots of people pride themselves on being great problem solvers. And if you just let's look at corporate America. As you move up the corporate ladder, you'll move up the ladder because you solved problems as a manager, a VP. As you're moving up, you're a good problem solver. But if you want keys to the executive room, you will have to make a transformation from being a problem solver to a problem creator. And if you are the CEO and you're not intentionally creating problems, you should be fired or retrained. So the key to driving growth and innovation is not spending your time putting out fires and solving problems. It really is creating problems for your people to solve. And lots of people talk about the leadership of the founding fathers of the United States. When they declared independence from Great Britain, that was a huge problem. It was so big that they put their lives on the line. I'm not suggesting people put their lives on the line to create problems, but it's something that kind of puts your butt on the line, something that you don't really know how to accomplish. And once it's accomplished, it alters your future. It changes your life forever. You can go back to the founding fathers declaring independence. That was a problem. You had opposition from Great Britain, and you didn't even know how you were going to create this country. There was no proof it could be done.
Hmm.
And when they solved it, you have this country that we have now. And you hear so many people say it's the greatest country in the world. But it started out not as solving a problem. They created a problem, and then they lived into that future, which required actions that would have never been needed if they didn't create the problem in the first place. So it's like creating the problem requires you to do things that you normally don't do if you're going to solve the problem, or if you're creating the problem for others to solve. They will learn new skills, new competencies. You may learn about new technologies, and ultimately you come out with something very innovative. And the person you have to become to solve it really helps to make you a bigger person and much more. You have some bragging rights.
Absolutely. And I'm sure most people listening have probably spent their entire lives trying to avoid problems.
Mhm.
But according to this theory, which I completely am on board with, that can be incredibly dangerous. I feel like that keeps you stuck.
Yes, yes. So if you're a company, I think you and I have discussed this. One of the signs that a company is in trouble is they are successful and
Mm,
they're doing really well at what they are doing, and then they are not creating problems to disrupt status quo. And eventually, some will one will do it. We talked about Kodak and how Kodak created the first digital camera, but they preferred going with status quo and what they were already doing, and they allowed someone else to come in and disrupt them. We also talked about Sony, how they actually created the iPod before Apple, but they chose to not market it, and then they let Apple disrupt them. So status quo is a way for you to really make yourself obsolete in the long run, or you'll have to play catch up, which can be very expensive to play catch up. And if we look at Kodak, they're not doing so well.
No, I definitely haven't really heard of them in a really long time, and that's
Right,
a really good point. It's the
right.
innovators, the thought leaders, the ones that shake things up. Like I'm picturing a snow globe right now. So, with all of that being said, what is some of the biggest lies then that society teaches us about success?
Maybe one of the big ones to start down the path is to say change is hard. And so that would be once people embrace that mindset, and it's a pretty universal belief system that change is hard. So why would you create a problem? Because a problem may mean you have to change, so you keep it the same. So whether it's Kodak or Sony who wanted to stay with what they were already doing, change, it's hard or people are going to resist. We have this preconceived notion of how people will respond to it, and we keep things as they are. So the belief that change is hard really kind of sets you up to remain status quo, and then it actually, once people buy into change is hard, you can justify it and say, hey boss, we tried it, but change is hard, so what can we do? We might as well just stay where we are and just keep, we're good at what we're doing, and people can justify remaining at status quo. And that becomes very dangerous for your organization. And eventually, someone, most likely outside of your industry, will disrupt you. And now you have to play catch up if you can play catch up. I mean, think of the horse and buggy companies that are no longer in existence, or the typewriter companies. Where are they?
Absolutely. In your experience, when did you realize that everything you taught about leadership was incomplete?
When did I realize that everything I taught about leadership was incomplete?
Know that everything that you'd been taught. So,
Or
you
that
have
I've
those
been
light
taught?
bulb moments where
Right,
you
right.
developed your, your system and the way that you lead. When did you realize that that wasn't the right way?
So I had the fortune of misfortune. So I learned at a young age that when life hands you lemons, you make lemonade. So there were some seemingly unfortunate circumstances that happened in my life that showed me how when extreme crisis occurs, it requires you to do things that you normally don't do. And I was able to sort of test that throughout my life. So the first time I saw that, I was 6 years old. I saw my mother run with 2 broken legs, and the car, she fell asleep, unfortunately, about 100 yards from home. Car's wrapped around a tree. She gets out the car, runs home, gets my father, and he comes back and get us. At the hospital, and it's myself and 2 younger siblings. We're all bloody, and I learned she had 2 broken legs and a broken arm, and I thought, "Wow, she didn't limp, she didn't crawl, she ran home, and human beings must have something, but what's the catalyst to pull that out of you?" So I really wanted to understand. So, at some point, you start doing reading about these incredible feats, the mother lifting the car off of the child, and the good Samaritan that runs into the burning building to rescue children who are trapped by the fire. How do people do these things? And then the next time when I was 21, I was told both my parents were dead. And now I'm the oldest of four. My brother's 19, my sisters are 16 and 12. And this was another misfortune, but it required me to be someone that I would have never had to have been at 21. And then to watch so much in the face of being distraught and devastated that your parents are permanently gone, to watch my sisters do things that you would never ask a 16 or a 12-year-old to do showed me that human beings have much greater capacity than they know. You just need a catalyst. So your parents' death, while that can be devastating, and how do you recover from that to bury both parents in the same day? What I saw was when you life created problems for us. First, at 6, created a problem with a car accident. My mother heroically runs home. Now at 21, life creates a huge problem. You don't have parents, your life has changed forever. And so I'm wanting to understand, how do you do that on purpose? So when I was an executive and I'm running a company that's in chaos, I saw that as sort of a repeat. Wow, I saw chaos when my parents died. And I saw how I worked through that and how my siblings rose to the occasion. What if I just used this organization as a proof of concept that I can replicate the same thing here in an organization? So we're in chaos. So I will, instead of telling people how to get out of chaos, I'm going to create problems for them. And when they solve those problems, it literally made the chaos go away. It stabilized the company. And we were in chaos because we were growing so fast that our organizational structures couldn't handle it. The people didn't have the skills and competencies. So the very things I learned from my parents' death about coaching people up, delegation, clear communication, asking people to think things through so that they develop new problem solving skills. It all was transferred to this organization. And then years later, I ran another company that was declining revenues for 3 years and turned that around. Now we were growing too fast and we could manage. So once again, chaos. And I saw the same thing. So I'm watching this pattern of what your question was. When do you realize that we've been somewhat misdirected about leadership needs to be a great problem solver? Because I'm watching live on the court when there's chaos, when there's problems. I'm seeing, on one hand, resilience, but on the other, if you provide people with the proper tools, they don't have to recover from chaos. They learn to navigate themselves through it and come out on the other end much stronger. It's like there's a chaos muscle to build in the gym, and one way to replicate a gym workout for being a great problem creator is to give people problems and not give them the answer. And they will have to think through. And there's something called neuroplasticity where your brain grows new neural pathways. And that's essentially what you're doing. So the problem, creating the problem on purpose disrupts the way you think, and your brain is really forced to grow a new neural pathway. And that new neural pathway gives you a completely new perspective of yourself in the world. And that's not included in leadership. So that's something that you want your leaders to constantly do if you're going to run a company that exists in perpetuity, which means constant innovation. You need to be able to disrupt yourself and not be afraid to disrupt your people. But now you need to be able to navigate your people through uncertainty, discomfort, complacency. You need to be able to navigate yourself and people through that. And that's neuroplasticity is sort of at the center of that, is at the heart of that. And that's not really taught to leaders. A way to think about it is managers are paid to control what occurs in time and space. Leaders are paid to disrupt what occurs in time and space. So if you are going to teach leadership, they need to be able to distinguish between a problem solver that controls what occurs and someone who intentionally disrupts and then able to navigate themselves. And so it's a mindset shift, and it really is very much a transformation, and that's really not emphasized in leadership. We almost teach people how to become obsolete by telling them to be problem solvers and know how to manage what's there and do it really well. And maybe you just lay people off and you restructure debt, but that's not how you create a company that will be successful and on the leading edge in the future.
Yeah, for sure. People who are not easily rattled, I find, are the most successful ones. You often reference Steve Jobs. And so instead of him asking people to improve something, he asked them to do the impossible. And can you tell us that story and why is that so important?
Well, so imagine, well, let's even take it back. In 1983, he introduced something called the Newton, and it failed. And the Newton is technically what we would call the iPad now. So if it was such a bad idea in 1983, why is it so successful now? So he asked them to build something in 1983 that made no sense. Most people didn't even have a computer on their desk at work in 1983. So definitely most people didn't have a computer at home. And now he's talking about putting a computer in the palm of your hand. it was nonsensical. People were or in Apple were famous for thinking Steve Jobs must be high. He must have smoked some really good stuff. Why is he asking us to do things that make no sense? And that's often how it looks when your organization is not trained to be able to effectively navigate intentional problems. So it would have looked impossible. But then when you fast forward and he comes back, it seems like they're embracing Steve Jobs and the guy who can take on the impossible. And he asks them to put 1,000 songs on a listening device. For one, Apple makes these computers that ad agencies love. Why are we making portable listening devices? Sony makes those, and they do a great job with the Walkman and the Discman. But to put 1,000 songs on a listening device, no one had done it. The MP3 player existed. And so people would have to learn new skills. They have to miniature. They're essentially making a computer, but it's so much smaller that even the vendors for Apple would have to rethink how they make products or semiconductors for Apple. So, and that may have been the problem in 1983. Everyone thought it was such a ridiculous idea. Why bother? No one's going to buy it anyway. So they made something that failed. But then when they have the iPod, now people are more open to innovation. And it's people say, he was ahead of his time. No, it's the way people were thinking, it was the mindsets that they had, that it was easy to reject it and say it's impossible in 1983. But all the natural resources to make the iPod in 2001 existed in 1983. So there was no reason. And then Jobs says, now that we have the iPod, great job, turn it into a cell phone. Another impossibility. Why are we going into the cell phone business? We make computers and now we do this iPod, a music thing. Why are we doing cell phones? But look at where the the iPhone is now. So these things that seem impossible are problems, but it's, as I said, it disrupts the way you think, and it disrupts the normal way that your brain will understand information and creativity. And you'll have to grow completely new neural pathways that give you a completely new perspective. So creating the problem really does create that disruption that opens new doors. And you wouldn't have gotten there if you were only focused on improving. If all Apple did was make the iMac or the Macintosh a little better, a little faster, that wouldn't have never been the path to a cell phone.
Yeah, I feel like breakthrough companies ask those impossible questions, and then the average ones will ask comfortable ones because they don't have that innovative mind. Do you have like a case study or an example from one of your own clients who created the right problem and it changed the company?
Sure, sure. So there's a company that makes consumable items. They manufacture food, and their grandfather started the company in 1930, and they had their own brand. Their grandfather actually started the organization as a storefront, and then his son-in-law came in and took it to a next level. Instead of just a storefront, he started selling their products commercially in the big supermarkets, the big box retailers. And they've been doing this and very successful. And now the grandsons are running the business, and they have their own brand, and the world knows them, and they have a great reputation. And then the question was, what would be a breakthrough? And there was something they always wanted to do, but just never got around to it, and it was twofold. One is we want to make snacks, more of a grab and go. And the other was we want to make products for other people. So we would be a co-packer. And we have the facility, we have a building, we have equipment, and we have personnel. And all someone would have to do is come in and say, this is the product, here's the recipe, and we make it, and then they go out and sell it. But how do you do that? It's going to require possibly new equipment, new training, uh, and it can be disruptive to the organization. But they actually took that on and became a co-packer. And one of their first accounts was really a breakthrough. It drove top line growth by about 20 increased margins, and it became the largest client in the history of the organization, being a co-packer. But then that also gave them a different mindset. So because they're making grab and go items, so then, you know, they start looking at other companies and they start making some of their own grab and go items, and they can either do it under the existing brand they've had for almost 100 years, or they start making new brands that or new brand names that allow them to penetrate untapped markets. So ultimately, that's what it was. We make our own product under our own brand. What's an untapped market for us? And an untapped market was being a co-packer. Completely different revenue stream, and it drove growth. It allowed them to train on machinery that they never would have used with their current equipment. And what was
Mm.
interesting is this new equipment made them more profitable per square foot of their facility than what they had in the past. So it benefited them in so many different ways, and it altered the future for them.
Wow, that's a great story. I love that. That's another example of that out of the box thinking. To bring the psychology into it a little bit, our brains, as we were talking about, crave certainty so much. And that certainty seems to keep us all average. And so they become addicted to comfort. And I'm curious as to what's actually happening psychologically when someone is overwhelmed. What is actually going on in the brain?
Yeah, so I would put 2 things up. One is it's kind of like that conversation that change is hard. So once you buy into it, then you'll find all kinds of reasons to prove change is hard. See, I didn't do it right. Look, I'm not good at this. So people will tell themselves they are overwhelmed or this is going to overwhelm me. So we have all kinds of presuppositions. Change is hard. That's too much. The one that people really love is I'm only human. You can't expect me to do that. So there are these beliefs that we have built into kind of the human paradigm. And once you buy into them, whatever limits come with that belief are socially acceptable until someone breaks it. And then there's another aspect, which is there are things that occur in our lives that shape how we see ourselves in the world. And sometimes those things are completely limiting, and other times they provide success only in certain situations and they can sabotage in another situation. So instead of telling you about a company, I'll tell you about an individual. I had a client, early 60s. He was a CPA by profession. He worked for one of the largest CPA firms and then decided he wanted to change careers and went into the mortgage industry. And in the beginning, he was doing okay. He hit a slump and had no way to get out of his slump. So he hired me. And as I'm working with him, he's telling me that he's really good at getting investors to the table. These were people he called heavy hitters. And the heavy hitters would, as a mortgage guy, these can be very profitable. These will be big deals for him. And so he could get the heavy hitter to the table. He just couldn't close the deal. And what we discovered is he's a master at making people comfortable. He knows how to break the ice. He says, like, out of nowhere, he just pulls out of thin air a comment. Everyone laughs. People are comfortable. And you like the guy. You want to do business with a guy you like. And once he's got you comfortable, well, he'll make another joke and he'll talk a little bit of business, and then he'll make another joke and another joke and another joke. And this heavy hitter is now, I like you. I'll have a beer with you, but I'm not doing a deal with you. Thanks. Nice meeting you. Goodbye. And he couldn't understand. It was, I think in one of the early Spider-Man movies, it was like my curse, my blessing and my curse. His blessing, he could break the ice and make you comfortable. His curse, he couldn't stop doing it. It was like it was the only gear that he had. So we looked back and found when he was 13 years old, he was in a car with guys who were older. They were 17, 18, and he was in a back seat, and someone looked and said, "Hey, why is this little kid, 13-year-old? How old are you, kid? Why is he in the car with us?" He makes a joke. Everyone laughs. They put their arm around him and say, "Oh, you're cool. You can hang with us." The way he survived not getting kicked out of the car was to make a joke, and it made everyone comfortable. That became his gear whenever he was in a room, in an environment where he didn't feel he belonged, and he had nowhere else to go except make jokes. So now he's with a heavy hitter. It's almost like he's getting a flashback to being a 13-year-old. and he just makes joke after joke, and it's funny. People like he's good at it, except they want to do business with him. So
Right.
he had to unlearn first, he had to be able to distinguish that was the moment, like the source of why he stuck with that gear of constantly making jokes. And once he could see, you put him at a table with another heavy hitter and he hears that, okay, start making jokes, start making jokes. He can actually stop it. Before he couldn't stop it because he had no idea it was related to this incident that occurred at 13. So to unlearn that and then train him in the proper techniques of sales training and the questions to ask so that you can have a discovery with a heavy hitter. And that guy in his first 3 months of working with me, he doubled his productivity. In the next 3
Wow.
months he doubled that. And I think after month 4 or so he went from expecting to be fired at work every day because he was in a slump. So he went from expecting to be fired to the boss calling him into the office and saying, "Hey, buddy, whatever you need, we'll give you. You need someone to support you. You need an assistant. You need this. Just tell me what you need. We'll give it to you." And he had 3 of his competitors courting him, and eventually, a competitor made him a better offer. So, that's quite a big transformation to go from expecting to being fired to being courted and your current employer giving you what you want. But his way to solve the problem of being uncomfortable was to make jokes.
Mm.
So he was fixing a problem that occurred at a young age. And so that's a lot of what hurts people in business. You're in an organization, the CEO says, we're going to go back to Steve Jobs, we're going to create this Newton. And everyone has these situations that occurred when you were younger. And when they trigger, you find a way to stay out of that feeling. Whatever you had, like this guy, he didn't want to feel like the 13-year-old again. So he made jokes. That's how he was able to remain comfortable. But that didn't work. It only worked. It worked as a one shot in the beginning. And maybe at the end of the meeting, he can make a joke, but you get one, you make people comfortable, but to perpetually do it, you joke your way out of a deal. So people have that in their life. And when they are presented with something that reminds them of the thing that was uncomfortable, they go back to that 5-year-old or 12-year-old, and whatever they did back then that worked, they're going to do it now, and it usually turns out to be a saboteur's mission.
Yeah, that's a great story. I love that. I would love to leave business for a minute because you wrote a book about relationships. So I'm curious as to how this applies to marriages and parenting and friendships.
Absolutely. So the book I wrote about relationships is because corporate America is losing $300 billion in workplace productivity because of divorce and when, bad breakups
Wow.
in relationships. So, we have about a 55% divorce rate. So that's a lot of people being distracted by divorce. And they found that people's productivity drops by 50 to 75% when they are going through a divorce. And so if you take the story of what I just said about when the boss says, "Hey, we're going to go this way and we're going to make these new products," and people get triggered by that. They find a way to sabotage the new initiative. The thing about business is there's proper business etiquette. So you can't just scream out and say, "I'm not doing this project. This is ridiculous. I'm not, screw you." They may say that in their mind, and then whatever their actions are really kind of correlated. They reflect that, like, I was never going to make this project successful because it's a bad idea or it'll make me obsolete, it'll make me look bad. In your intimate relationships, you don't have proper business etiquette. So you can lash out any way that you want and you'll never know you're lashing out because of this thing that happened when you were much younger. So you hear people say, "I'm triggered," and they are in conflict with themselves. So it's almost never the person or the situation. The conflict is something that's unresolved in you and you don't know how to resolve it. So the discomfort will have you lash out and your relationship starts to crumble because you're not you haven't been able to navigate the internal conflict that you are experiencing.
Remind us what the name of your book is.
Sure, here's why you can't find love.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, leadership, it's definitely all connected. Is this the reason why so many relationships fail, this concept, and the exact same reason why businesses fail? Is that what you're saying?
Sure. So one of the things I talk about in the book is that in your waking hour, for your when you wake up in the morning and someone wakes up and says, "Oh, it's Monday. Monday suck," or they wake up on Friday and say, "Thank God it's Friday." People saying that never made up those saying. You didn't make up the idea that Monday suck and Fridays are great. You inherited that, and it's playing like a radio station in your mind. So there are things that you hear. Change is hard. Life is hard. Relationships, they take hard work. You didn't make any of this up. It just plays. It's like a radio station that you can't turn off and something happens. It's like this stimulus response. See, I knew relationships were hard. Look at this. We can't even, talk through this situation. We're yelling and screaming at one another. And this is proof that relationships are hard. Or my significant other needs to change, and because change is hard, they are never going to change. We're always trying to change, even our parents. We want to change our parents. So it's like when two people are in front of one another, you hear the conversation that's coming out of your mouth, but then there's a whole nother conversation playing in your head, and the other person is not privy to that. So technically, there are four conversations going on, and the one you don't hear, if the two of you are thinking the same way, you will say, "This person resonates with me." And you don't
Hmm.
really know why, but it's the second silent conversation, like the radio station. Somehow, the way you grew up, you all ended up with the same radio station playing the same conversations, and you really understand one another, and there's an affinity. But if the person's listening to a radio station that conflicts with yours, then you can no longer justify why you've been living a certain way. Like, imagine you're with someone and they really believe change is hard, and they meet someone who says, "Oh, change is not hard. Here's some things." And this is going to create a clash. It's like, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. I know, I have experience. Change is hard. You were born with a silver spoon in your mouth," and those people don't get along. But if they both believe change is hard, they both believe relationships take hard work, they're going to be in a relationship that always has strife, because that's the way relationships are. That's just the way life is. And
Right.
if that's your mindset, well, you're not a banana that you peel off a layer to go to work and then put it back on when you go home. You're the same person at work. So the things that trigger you or you find difficult at home are going to be triggering and difficult at work. You just once again have that business etiquette at work. So you comport yourself in a way that's professional. At least most people do. You do get people who yell and scream and are completely unfiltered. But most people they color within the lines.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that makes so much sense. The state of mind that you're in, like if you're happy or unhappy, it's going to affect everything, including work, relationships.
Well,
So
you know
there's,
what? I want to take that's a good one that you brought up. That's a great myth to address. People believe they have to find happiness, so they're searching for it. And happiness is always there for you until you say, "I'm unhappy," or "Something's wrong," or "I can't be happy in this." Like, happiness is not something to seek out. It's there, and no one can give it to you because it's always there. No one can give it to you and no one can take it away from you. But we live our lives as though someone has to make me happy. I'm married because I thought this relationship would make me happy, and it didn't. And so you now outsourced your happiness to someone else, or kind of not even to another person. You outsourced it to this intangible relationship, hoping the relationship would magically make you happy.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's all within us. We're responsible for our own happiness. Nothing
Yes.
or no one else can make us happy. That's 100% correct. Many people don't know that. Many people keep seeking and they keep buying things and they think that, the next job, the next house, the next relationship is going to make them happy, the next dog, the next baby. And then they get there and they're confused as to why they're still feeling the exact same way. And I think that's where your theory comes in with the making yourself uncomfortable to push yourself to that next level and to gain confidence in yourself, which
So
leads me
so
to my next question and the last one for today. So there's,
okay.
thousands of people listening, and imagine some of them, most of them are stuck or scared, and they know they need to change something. What is the first uncomfortable problem they should intentionally create for themselves tomorrow morning?
Well, in one way, that would depend on where you are, right? If you're 2 years old, learn to tie your shoes, right? So,
Yeah.
but ta take on that thing that you in the back of your mind that you wish, "I wish I could have," and take actions. But here's what's going to happen. That radio station is going to play things that promote doubt. You know, you're not cut out for this. People like you don't do this. It's going to tell you the reasons you can't do. And when you listen to that radio station closely, what you'll hear is that radio station is not even your voice. It could be a teacher from elementary school. It could be from the movies. It could be a friend, the protagonist in the antagonist in your life. You'll hear the voice is not yours, and once you can hear the voice is not yours, acknowledge, wow, you're the voice that's been running my life for all of these years. But what is the thing that I'm truly committed to accomplishing? So in the back of my mind, I've always wanted to do X. I've always wanted to go to China, but I thought, well, I don't speak Mandarin. I've never been so far from home. It could be dangerous, all of these things. And all of those conversations about the danger and what you can't do, those are not your beliefs. You inherited those. Go buy the ticket and go to
Hmm.
China. Go have an experience that and by doing that, you'll experience a side of yourself. And when you come before you even come home, you're thinking about the next thing that you can do that has always been in the back of your mind. And you had a long list of reasons for why you can't. If you're the CEO of a company, what's that project that you want to do, but it's not the right time? The economy is not right. The geopolitical situation. I don't have the money. All of these things that you say you don't have, sit down with your team, develop a strategy, and put a drop dead time limit on when you're going to complete that project and do it. Allocate resources and commit to it all out and make it happen.
Make it happen. Exactly. Just do it. Take the next step. Thanks so much for being here and for having another just such an insightful conversation and a different way to look at, growth and change. I truly think that, breaking through those barriers just helps everything in life and can strengthen everything, including, like you said, relationships and business. Tell everyone more about the work that you do and where people can find you.
Sure, sure. So I'm in the business of working with organizations that are looking to create a disruptive or breakthrough that would be disruptive to the organization and possibly to the marketplace. And along with that, I work with them to transform corporate culture to ensure the staff and management do not sabotage that breakthrough initiative. And so this transformation is personal, but it's also organization because it changes the culture of the enterprise.
Amazing. And remind us where people can find you. Did you say that?
Sure, my website is turnaround.com and IP is like intellectual property, or you can find me on LinkedIn under Ted Santos.
Amazing. What is one thing you want people to remember from today's conversation?
So if you grasp the idea that no one can make you happy, that you are responsible for that, then also think about no one can make you sad or angry. Learn to catch what you say to yourself. Even saying, you did this and it made me happy. I mean, you're happy because you're happy. You may like what someone did, but the happiness is yours and the anger is yours. And no one made you angry. They may have reminded you of something. So there are so many things in life that derail us. You can be so happy that you don't do the project. You feel content without doing it, right? You feel like you almost did it because you talked about it take 100% responsibility of who you are and the actions you take, and never outsource that. Never outsource who you are and your accomplishments to anyone or anything else.
Amen. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here today. And again, for sharing your amazing insights.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure.
And thank you so much to our audience for tuning in. If today's conversation challenged the way you think, then it accomplished exactly what Ted Santos set out to do. So, real breakthroughs don't begin when life gets easier, they begin when we stop avoiding the discomfort that leads to growth. And so, Ted's work reminds us that the biggest opportunities are often hidden inside the problems we are trying to escape. To learn more about Ted, his disruptive leadership model, his speaking, coaching, and his latest book, visit Turnaround Investment Partners. And if this episode changed the way you think, please share it with someone who is ready for their next breakthrough. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Stay tuned for the next episode. Bye for now.